I was a tour guide at a national park known for its geology. A man spent 20 minutes explaining to his family that all the rock layers were fake. This whole canyon is a government landfill from the 1950s. He said each layer is a different decade of trash. See that reddish layer? That's all the rusty cars from the 70s. The darker one is probably old tires. They just covered it with a thin layer of dirt and called it nature so they wouldn't have to pay for proper disposal. It's a conspiracy, and we're paying to look at their garbage. My university roommate, a history major no less, tried to explain the Cold War to me. He said with complete conviction, it wasn't a Cold War because of political tension. It was literally fought in the coldest places on Earth, like Siberia and Antarctica. They had to develop special frozen bullets, and the spies wore 3 layers of coats. That's why it took so long. Everyone kept having to go inside for hot chocolate breaks. The fall of the Berlin Wall was because the ice holding it together finally melted in the spring. He was dead serious and got angry when I started laughing. My brother's friend explained that all the world's oceans are connected by a single giant underground river. It's like the planet's circulatory system. He said the Pacific and Atlantic aren't separate. They're just different rooms in the same house. The tides are caused by a giant whale that lives in the river. And when it breathes in and out, it pushes and pulls all the water. Sailors call him Big Tim. He's the reason we have waves. He's a very important part of our ecosystem. My coworker was trying to explain why British people have accents. Okay, so when we won the Revolutionary War, we obviously got to keep the original correct way of speaking English. As a punishment for losing, we made all the British people talk in a silly, fake accent. So we'd always known they were the losers. They've just been forced to keep it up for generations. It's actually really sad when you think about it. They're linguistically oppressed by our freedom. A man on a flight to Italy was explaining the Leaning Tower of Pisa to his girlfriend. It wasn't a mistake. It was designed that way on purpose as a political statement. The architect was in a fight with the mayor of the town, so he built it, leaning to symbolize how corrupt and unbalanced the local government was. The mayor was too stupid to understand the insult, and now it's a famous tourist attraction. It's the most successful act of passive aggression in human history. My sister's ex-boyfriend believed that the moon landing was real, but that Neil Armstrong never came back. The person we saw on TV was a Russian clone they sent to replace him, he whispered. The real Neil found a civilization of aliens living on the moon, and he became their king. He sends secret messages back to us in the patterns of the craters. The government knows, but they're afraid that if we find out, we'll all want to move to the moon and live under King Neil's glorious rule. A man at a vineyard in California was explaining how wine is made. They don't stomp on grapes anymore, he told his date. That's unhygienic. Now they have specially trained birds that go and peck each grape individually. The bird's beak injects a tiny bit of enzyme that starts the fermentation process right on the vine. Red wine comes from angry birds like cardinals, and white wine comes from peaceful birds like doves. The year on the bottle tells you which flock of birds worked on it. I once heard a man explain that volcanoes are actually dragon nests. The earth is hollow and it's filled with sleeping dragons. He said, when a dragon gets a bad dream, it thrashes around and breathes fire. And that's what causes an earthquake and a volcanic eruption. The lava is just leftover dragon barbecue sauce. The government covers it up and calls it geology because if people knew there were dragons, everyone would try to steal their gold and it would mess up the whole economy. A guy in my astronomy club argued that Jupiter wasn't a real planet. It's a hoax, he claimed. It's just a really big high-definition screen that NASA put in space to hide what's really behind. The great red spot is just a dead pixel they can't fix. They use it to project fake alien signals and stuff to justify their budget. If it were a real planet, we would have landed on it by now. But you can't land on a TV screen, can you? A woman in my office insisted that Australia doesn't have its own moon. The moon we see is the American moon, she explained. When it's nighttime here, the moon goes down and travels under the earth to get to Australia. That's why they're a day ahead. It takes the moon a whole day to travel through the planet's core. Sometimes it gets stuck on the way, and that's what causes an earthquake. It's basic physics. People, they're just borrowing our moon until they can afford their own. My uncle has a wild theory about why we dream. He says dreams are just memories from your ancestors that are stored in your DNA. If you dream you're fleeing, it means you had a great-great-great-grandfather who was a bird. If you have a nightmare about a monster, it's because your caveman ancestor was eaten by a dinosaur. It's not psychology. It's just genetic history playing like a movie in your head. I keep dreaming I'm a king. So, I'm pretty sure I'm related to Elvis. I overheard a woman explaining the solar system. Earth is the only real planet. All the others, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, they're just the ghosts of planets that used to be here but died a long time ago. We see them at night because that's when ghosts come out. A shooting star is just a planet ghost sneezing. Scientists know this, but they don't want to cause a mass panic. So they make up stories about gas giants and asteroid belts to keep us calm. I was in a cafe in Paris and an American was explaining French to his son. The French language is just English spoken backwards. He said they invented it during a war so their enemies couldn't understand their secret messages. They just took all the English words, spelled them backwards, and then made up a fancy accent to go with it. If you listen closely, you can hear the English words hidden inside. It's a code. That's why it's so hard to learn. A tourist in Japan was loudly complaining to his wife. I don't understand why everything is so small here. The cars, the apartments, the food portions. It's because they lost the war. As part of the surrender treaty, we made them sign a document saying they're not allowed to have anything full-size for 100 years. It's a way to keep their economy in check and remind them who's boss. It's actually a brilliant piece of American foreign policy that no one talks about. My former boss was convinced that wind was man-made. There's no such thing as natural wind, he'd say. It's all generated by giant hidden fans that the government controls. They use it to regulate air traffic and control the weather. When there's a hurricane, it's because a fan operator fell asleep on the high switch. They create gentle breezes in rich neighborhoods and tornadoes in poor ones. It's all about atmospheric real estate. Wake up, people. I had a friend in college who thought that Canada was a fictional place. It's not real. She'd argue the US government made it up to scare us into being patriotic. They show us fake pictures of maple leaves and moose and tell us it's this super polite country to make us feel bad about ourselves. All the people who claim to be Canadian like Ryan Reynolds are just paid actors from Montana. The landmass is there, but it's just an empty forest they use for military training. I once had a student in my creative writing class who tried to explain where ideas come from. He claimed that the brain has a tiny Wi-Fi receiver in it, and all ideas are constantly being broadcast from a secret satellite launched by Walt Disney in the 60s. Writer's block, he said, is just what happens when you're in an area with a bad signal. That's why people get good ideas in the shower. The water acts as a natural amplifier for the Disney signal. It's why all the best stories are basically the same. My neighbor tried to explain the concept of gravity to me. It's a subscription service run by the government, he said in a low voice. We pay for it in our taxes. It's what keeps us from floating off into space. In rich countries like America, we pay for premium gravity, which is strong and reliable. In poorer countries, they can only afford the basic plan, which is why their stuff breaks all the time. Astronauts in space are just people who haven't paid their gravity bill. A tourist in Egypt was explaining the hieroglyphics. These aren't ancient writings, she told her family. This is the world's first comic book. Each little picture is a panel. See? That's the superhero Anubis fighting the bad guy who is a giant snake. It tells a whole story about good versus evil. The pyramids aren't tombs. They were the first Comic-Con convention centers where all the fans would gather. History is so much more interesting when you realize it's all about superheroes. A woman at a bookstore was explaining literature. All books in the world were written by one guy, she said. A very old immortal man named Shakespeare. He just uses different pen names for different genres. Stephen King, J. K. Rowling, Dr. Seuss, all him. He does it because he's bored. You can tell because all the stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's his signature move. It's the biggest and most obvious conspiracy in the world, but no one seems to notice. Overheard a dialogue between two American girls at the Louvre standing in front of the Mona Lisa. Why is she so famous? She's not even that hot. It's not about her looks. It's because she was the first person to ever smile in a painting. Before her, everyone was super serious because they didn't have good dentists. She had perfect teeth. So, the King of France hired Leonardo to paint her as like the first ever toothpaste commercial. It was a huge deal at the time. She basically invented happiness for poor people. A woman at my gym explained her theory on muscle growth. Muscles don't get bigger from lifting weights, she said. When you lift something heavy, you create tiny black holes in your arms. Your body's natural reaction is to send fat cells to plug the holes so your atoms don't get sucked out. What you think is muscle is actually just tightly packed emergency response fat. That's why you feel sore. It's the sensation of your fat cells screaming as they get compacted into the black holes. An American tourist at the Colosseum in Rome was explaining its purpose. This was the world's first shopping mall. Each of these archways was a different store, a Gucci, a Prada. The gladiators weren't fighting to the death. They were just aggressive shoppers on Black Friday trying to get the best deals. The emperor would sit up there and decide who got the last chariot on sale. The stories about lions and death were just made up later to make it sound more exciting than it really was. My aunt believes that all dogs are naturally born speaking perfect English. The reason they only bark, she explained at a family dinner, is because they are part of a global secret society of spies. They pretend to be dumb animals so they can listen to our conversations and report back to the dog government. A bark is just a coded message. When a dog wags its tail, it's not happy. It's activating its secret transmitter to send intel. They are smarter than all of us. I was at a farmer's market, and a woman who was explaining to her friend why organic vegetables are more expensive. It's because they have to play classical music to the plants for their entire lives, she said. Plants that listen to Mozart grow with more nutrients. But the farmer has to buy tiny little headphones for every single carrot and tomato. The cost of all that audio equipment is what you're paying for. Non-organic stuff is grown with rock music, which is cheaper, but makes the vegetables angry and less healthy. My cousin believes that snow is not frozen water. Snow is actually a type of planetary dandruff that flakes off the Earth's upper atmosphere. He claims the planet has a dry scalp problem in the winter. That's why it's white and flaky. A blizzard is just a particularly bad case of it. Skiing is basically just sliding around on the planet's dead skin cells. When you think about it, it's actually pretty gross. I prefer summer when the planet is properly moisturized. I overheard a woman at a sea life aquarium explaining fish to her son. Fish don't actually live in the ocean, she said, pointing at a shark. They all live in giant caves deep underground. The ocean is just where they come to play and go on vacation. That's why it's saltwater. It's like a giant spa for them. But at night, they all swim back down through secret holes in the ocean floor to go home to their real houses. It's why you can't ever find them when you go night fishing. A guy I worked with had a unique take on evolution. It's real, but it works backwards, he said. A long time ago, we were all super intelligent, godlike beings. But we got lazy and started evolving downwards. We became monkeys, then fish, then eventually just single-celled organisms. The monkeys you see at the zoo are just humans from the future who have devolved. We're all on a one-way trip to becoming pond scum. It's very depressing. I was working at a travel agency when a man came in wanting to book a one-day cruise from Barcelona, Spain to Lisbon, Portugal. I explained that they share a land border and a cruise wouldn't be possible or make any sense. He slammed his hand on the counter. Look at the map. Lady, they're both on the water. Just have the boat go out into the ocean, turn right, and pull in. How hard is that? Is your captain afraid of the open sea? This is the worst customer service I've ever experienced. In America, we just build a canal for this kind of thing.